On the surface, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo seemed like just another ordinary man living the American dream. Tall, friendly, and with a laid-back smile, he had a background that anyone would describe as promising. Born in 1963, Bruce grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Southern California, surrounded by a community that valued stability and tradition. In school, he excelled in math and engineering, a combination that would open doors for him in the future. After college, Bruce embarked on a technical career, landing well-paying jobs in the electronics and aviation sectors. Co-workers described him as intelligent, though somewhat reserved. Outside the professional environment, Bruce was known for his charm and ability to win people over, especially women. He seemed to have it all, a stable career, friends, and a bright future ahead. But Bruce's life was not always as it appeared. Beneath the friendly facade was a man struggling to keep up appearances. Although he was successful at work, his personal life was often marked by disagreements and impulsive decisions. One of those decisions was his marriage to Sylvia Ortega, an energetic and charismatic woman who brought a warm and close-knit family into the relationship. At first, the couple seemed perfect. Close friends remembered Bruce as a thoughtful partner, always praising Sylvia and her connection to her family. However, small conflicts began to surface soon after the wedding. Sylvia was sociable and outgoing, while Bruce preferred the quiet of home. Despite their differences, the two appeared committed to making the relationship work. Still, something changed within Bruce. Over time, his reluctance to address issues directly began manifesting in silence and isolation. He rarely shared his feelings, choosing instead to suppress his frustrations. To those around him, Bruce appeared calm and in control, but internally, a storm was brewing. That storm started to gain momentum as his marriage began to unravel. The cracks, which initially seemed small, soon became chasms. And it was in this context that Bruce's true nature began to emerge. The relationship between Bruce and Sylvia, which once seemed promising, began to deteriorate shortly after their marriage. To many, what happened behind closed doors remained invisible. Sylvia, always extroverted and charismatic, tried to maintain the image of a perfect family. Meanwhile, Bruce withdrew further into his isolated world, unable to cope with the growing marital conflicts. The arguments were constant, but the real issue lay in their differing expectations. Sylvia wanted Bruce to be more emotionally present and financially supportive. However, he was notoriously controlling when it came to money, even refusing to contribute to basic household expenses. She discovered that Bruce had hidden large sums of money while pressuring her to cut costs. The marriage finally collapsed when Sylvia found out that Bruce had lied about several important matters, including his finances and personal debts. For Sylvia, this was the final straw. She filed for divorce, carrying with her the hope of starting over without the weight of Bruce's lies. But for Bruce, the divorce was a devastating blow. The separation not only shook his sense of control but also placed him in a vulnerable financial position. The court's decision to require him to pay spousal support to Sylvia was seen by Bruce as a personal humiliation. He lost not only the house and part of his belongings but also his connection to the Ortega family, which had become his safe haven. The tension grew as Bruce began delaying the support payments. He justified his inability to pay by claiming financial difficulties, even as he continued spending money on personal luxuries. For Sylvia, this only reinforced her sense of betrayal. She confided to friends that she feared Bruce's erratic behavior and believed he harbored deep resentment. While Sylvia tried to move on, Bruce sank further into his frustration and anger. He began harboring a silent grudge, mentally replaying every moment of humiliation. In his mind, the divorce was not just a separation, it was a personal affront, a blow that demanded retribution. It was then that Bruce began planning something no one could have imagined. The idea of revenge started as a small spark in Bruce Jeffrey Pardo's mind but quickly grew into an uncontrollable fire. He felt wronged, betrayed by the judicial system, and humiliated by the separation. Instead of seeking a solution to his problems, Bruce began nurturing dark thoughts, which soon evolved into meticulous and coldly calculated plans. In early December 2008, Bruce took the first concrete steps to execute his revenge. He started by purchasing a Santa Claus suit, a symbol that, ironically, represented joy and generosity. In Bruce's eyes, the suit was more than a disguise. It was a way to mock the happiness of the Ortega family on a night that should have been one of unity and celebration. At the same time, he acquired firearms, including semi-automatic pistols, which he would carry concealed under the suit. Additionally, Bruce built an improvised flamethrower using fuel cylinders, a device that indicated not just his intent to kill but also to completely destroy the home he considered the center of his humiliation. Over weeks, Bruce fine-tuned every detail of his plan. He tested the weapons, experimented with the flamethrower, and ensured everything was ready for Christmas Eve. To the outside world, he seemed calm. He continued going to the gym, chatting casually with neighbors, and maintaining appearances. Yet internally, Bruce was consumed by a deep hatred. While planning the attack, Bruce also grappled with his own demons. He made a point of blaming Sylvia and her family for all his frustrations. In his distorted mind, they were responsible for his financial and emotional ruin. He did not see his actions as an imminent crime but as a reckoning, a form of personal justice. The choice of Christmas Eve was especially cruel. He knew that the Ortega family would be gathered to celebrate, surrounded by laughter, music, and presents. For Bruce, destroying this moment represented the perfect revenge. He wanted the date to be remembered not as a celebration but as an eternal nightmare for the survivors. Days before Christmas, Bruce made the final preparations. He loaded his car with weapons, ammunition, and the flamethrower. Each item seemed like a piece of a macabre ritual he was about to perform. As he drove through the city, the twinkling Christmas lights contrasted with the dark thoughts consuming him. Everything was ready. Bruce knew that once he donned the Santa suit, there would be no turning back. He was about to turn a night of love and togetherness into the worst nightmare Covina had ever faced. On Christmas Eve 2008, the Ortega family's house was filled with laughter and joy. As usual, they had gathered to celebrate the holiday with a grand dinner, gift exchanges, and stories shared around the Christmas tree. It was an annual ritual, a moment of unity that kept the family spirit alive. Inside the house, there were 25 people, all carefree, enjoying the magic of the evening. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo parked his car in front of the house, dressed as Santa Claus. The pristine red suit and white beard created a grotesque contrast with the arsenal he carried. In his hands, a package disguised a semi-automatic pistol. In his car, the improvised flamethrower waited. Around 11:30 p.m., Bruce approached the front door. When he rang the doorbell, the children were the first to run to the door, excited about Santa's arrival. But what should have been a magical moment quickly turned into an indescribable nightmare. As soon as the door opened, Bruce pulled out the hidden gun and began shooting. Chaos erupted in seconds. Screams of despair echoed through the house as people tried to protect themselves. Bruce moved through the house, shooting indiscriminately at everyone he encountered. Sylvia Ortega, his ex-wife, was one of the first targets. She was shot at point-blank range, with no chance to defend herself. Other family members tried to resist, but Bruce was determined not to leave any survivors. As the gunfire continued, some people managed to escape. One woman jumped out of a second-story window with a child in her arms, while others hid in closets and behind furniture. Even so, the number of victims grew by the minute. Bruce was ruthless, driven by a mix of hatred and a strange sense of mission accomplished. After exhausting his weapons, Bruce returned to his car and retrieved the flamethrower. He re-entered the house and began setting it ablaze, spreading fuel throughout the living room. Within minutes, the flames engulfed the Christmas tree, the presents, and what little hope remained in that scene of horror. The police and firefighters were called by neighbors who heard the gunshots and saw the smoke rising. By the time they arrived, the house was already engulfed in flames. Rescue teams found survivors in shock, some covered in blood and burns. Inside the house, 9 bodies were recovered, all members of the Ortega family. Bruce, however, had already left the scene. He drove to his brother's house in Sylmar, where he apparently intended to carry out the next phase of his plan. However, something unexpected happened. While using the flamethrower, Bruce suffered severe burns that damaged part of his Santa suit. Facing unbearable pain and realizing he couldn't continue, he decided to end it all right then and there. When he arrived at his brother's house, Bruce took his own life with a single gunshot. When police found his body, the scene reflected the tragedy he had caused, a man consumed by rage, unable to cope with his own failures, and determined to leave behind a trail of destruction. Subsequent investigations revealed that Bruce had planned something even bigger. In his car, police found explosives and ammunition indicating his intention to extend the massacre. Fortunately, these plans were thwarted before more lives were lost. The tragedy left the city of Covina in a state of shock. The community, which once celebrated the Christmas spirit, now had to grapple with the memory of a horrific crime. The Covina Massacre was not just an act of violence, it was a demonstration of how far hatred and resentment could push a person. When Bruce Jeffrey Pardo left the burning house, his plan seemed far from over. In his twisted mind, the destruction of the Ortega family was only the beginning of a larger cycle of revenge. In the trunk of his car, police later discovered extra ammunition, supplies, and homemade explosives, suggesting Bruce intended to continue spreading terror. But the night did not go as he had envisioned. During the massacre, while using the improvised flamethrower to set the house ablaze, Bruce suffered severe burns to his face and hands. Parts of his Santa suit became soaked with flammable fuel, resulting in painful injuries that began to limit his movements. What initially seemed like a flawless plan started to crumble. Driving to his brother's house in Sylmar, Bruce carried the physical and psychological weight of his actions. He knew he could no longer carry out the next phase of his plan. Upon arrival, he entered the house without his brother noticing and locked himself in one of the rooms. There, consumed by a mixture of anger and despair, and unable to endure the pain of his choices, he made his final decision. A few hours after the massacre, Bruce took his own life with a single gunshot. When police found his body, the evidence around him told the story of a man who, unable to cope with the pain of his decisions, chose to end his life as abruptly as he began his reign of terror. Though Bruce escaped justice, his actions left deep scars, both physical and emotional, on those who survived that night. The Covina Massacre left a trail of destruction that extended far beyond the burning house. For the survivors, Christmas Eve became a marker of pain and trauma that would shape their lives forever. The memories of that night, the screams, the flames, and the loss of loved ones, were impossible to erase. The community of Covina, once known for its Christmas spirit, plunged into mourning. Neighbor after neighbor expressed disbelief and sadness as they tried to comprehend how something so brutal could happen in such a peaceful place. Improvised memorials sprang up in the weeks that followed, with flowers, candles, and messages left by those mourning the lost lives. The tragedy also had a national impact. The case sparked debates on domestic violence, mental health, and access to firearms in the United States. Public safety experts questioned how Bruce was able to acquire so many weapons and build incendiary devices without raising suspicion. Local authorities began reviewing safety protocols, seeking ways to prevent similar tragedies. The Ortega family, who lost 9 members that night, became a symbol of resilience amid the pain. Survivors shared how their physical wounds were small compared to the emotional scars left by the massacre. For them, celebrating Christmas would never be the same again. The story of Bruce Jeffrey Pardo and the Covina Massacre remains a somber reminder of what can happen when anger and resentment spiral out of control. Even years later, the question lingers, could anything have been done to prevent this tragedy? The Covina Massacre was not just a brutal crime, it was a multifaceted tragedy that revealed the failings in the social and emotional dynamics surrounding Bruce Jeffrey Pardo. His descent into the abyss exposes the dangers of emotional isolation, accumulated resentment, and the inability to seek help in the face of adversity. Behind the Santa suit, Bruce was a man consumed by frustrations and grievances he never learned to address. His story raises important questions. How were warning signs overlooked? How can society intervene before a spiral of hatred turns into violence? Although Bruce was the perpetrator of the massacre, the roots of his actions, including the neglect in addressing his mental health and the ease of acquiring lethal weapons, are issues that transcend his case. For the victims and their families, Christmas will never again be an innocent celebration. The tragedy left permanent scars but also brought forth stories of courage and resilience. Survivors of the night found ways to honor the loved ones they lost, turning their pain into a call for awareness. Bruce Jeffrey Pardo's case remains a grim reminder that beneath the calm surface of everyday life, unresolved conflicts can lurk, ready to explode in unimaginable ways. It challenges us to reflect on the fragility of human relationships and the need for empathy, dialogue, and intervention before tragedies like this repeat themselves. As we remember this devastating event, one crucial lesson emerges: violence is never the answer. And for future generations, the hope is that stories like this serve as a warning to prevent other lives from being marked by the same kind of horror.